On
always
this episode of Who Dem.
People didn't want to integrate the military. People didn't want to let, gays and lesbians serve openly. People didn't want transgender military people in the military. Every time we kind of make this change, and you see people like Pete Hegseth now is saying that, because we've made these changes, he doesn't see that for the better, right?
Mm-hmm.
Our current Secretary of Defense sees that as us becoming weaker and more woke and not really focusing on the lethality, which nothing could be different. Nothing could be more wrong.
Your oldest one is the one who plays travel ball.
Well, they're twins.
Okay, that's right.
So they're both the same age, but no, Alexander, who was born, I guess technically would be the second one born because he was born 3 minutes later.
Okay.
Is the one who plays travel. He's really into it.
Okay. Christopher
just kind of likes to do it for fun, but Alexander's a lot more passionate about it.
Mm-hmm. And that was Alexander's game you were at the other day?
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
and what position they got him playing mostly?
They're kind of like now where they're playing a little bit of everything, but his travel ball coach wants him to kind of stick at shortstop and like, hey, I think he can, and actually can make the throw. So it's not. He's not. He's a little kid, right? He's a little guy, but he can make the throw from short, and he actually made a good play the other day, like where he went to the hole, backhanded it, and then kind of reached and threw it on a line to the first baseman
out in the 5-6 hole between left field and third base.
The guy, but
okay,
they
wow.
The kid beat it out, but I was like, damn, that was a pretty good play.
Yeah.
Usually don't see like 11-year-old kids making that kind of play.
Well, shortstop, it's like it takes arm, it takes definitely some speed, but you're also like the communicator of the infield, the captain, more or less. You got to be able to talk. You got to be able to use your brain while playing the game, as opposed to just getting your body out to wherever the ball is.
Yeah,
it's not an easy position.
No, I mean it's. I don't think it's easy at any level, right? I think your two biggest positions out there are really your shortstop and your catcher.
Absolutely,
right? Because your catcher, especially as you get more into like high school, into like especially like the pros or and stuff like that, it's the catcher's out there. Not only is he calling the game for the pitcher, right? Balls and what pitch to throw. But he's also out there calling plays. You got like bunt defenses, first and third defenses, and that's all coming from the catcher. Like, he's the one kind of giving the signals out there for everything. And he's got to line up there's going to be a play at the plate. He's got to line up the cutoff man. And, he's usually the one yelling to make the cut or not. So, yeah, catchers. He loves to actually play both. He likes playing short, but he really likes to catch too.
No, and I think it was a good thing for me as a kid, too, because I did play catcher a while. That was my position along with third base. I usually had more of an arm. And you're right. Catcher, you have to use your brain. You have to communicate with people. And, I mean, for me, that was the place where I learned how to put different things in my brain at once, sort of multitask and critical think a little bit more. Probably right around the age that your son's at right now, like when I was 11, 12 years old. It's great memories. I remember when I was 11 years old, I had like a little league team in Ladera Ranch, and we went to this championship tournament called Tournament of Champions. It was like the few best teams from each little league.
Yeah.
We played like San Clemente, San Juan Capistrano, Mission Viejo, and we got through like 5 games, and we ended up winning the thing. And I pitched most of the last game, and they had like a article in the newspaper about it, like some local San Juan Capistrano newspaper, and I had it on my bedroom bulletin board for like years after that. It was like I thought it was the coolest thing forever. So it's good your boys are in that age right now. There's memories that you don't really ever forget.
Yeah.
Well, sounds like also you had a busy weekend. We talked on Saturday with Cenk, and then yesterday I saw you were at the Capitol Hill steps with Hakeem Jeffries and a couple other representatives.
Yeah, Senator Booker, Hakeem Jeffries, our House leader, the Democratic leader, decided to do a sit-in on the steps, and they started, like I said, 6 a.m. Sunday morning.
Yeah.
And we found out about it. They happened to be in town, and so made the the trek over there to kind of be supportive of those efforts.
Yeah. How's your relationship with those representatives, and what are your thoughts on their approach to, I guess, the democratic resistance in terms of everything? It's kind of a vague question, but I just want to hear your thoughts on it.
No, I look, I think they're both, doing good things. I think they're both, understand their role as a leader, and that people want to see their members of Congress doing something. And so they decided to just sit in there. And like they said, it was just about having a conversation with the American people. When they started, it was just them two sitting on the steps. But throughout the day, more people kept coming. Some people stayed longer than others. Some kind of just came in and kind of saw what was going on and then left. Some people stayed, hours. But it was, I thought it was a great event. And it was, nobody knew what was going on, or at least we didn't have any word that it was going to go on. It was something that my wife actually saw on TikTok through some other influencers out there. One of her favorites, the Jolly Good Ginger.
Yes.
The Jolly Good Ginger. So he kind of was talking about it, and then she said, "You got to go to this. You got to go to this." I'm like, "What are you talking about? I haven't even heard about this." And then I got a text from my chief of staff. It's like, "Oh yeah, this is going on." So, I ran out there and, was able to kind of sit down and say hello, and they gave me the mic for a little bit, and it was a good time. And it was great to see so many people kind of showing up and being out there and listening in and cheering. And, I think hearing what we want to say, right, that, the message I tried to cross and what they are, right, is that we are in this together. This is a movement for the people, by the people, and that, we're going to do this together to tell this Trump administration that what they're trying to get away with, we're not just going to stand by quiet and let them get away with it.
Absolutely, yeah. And I heard about the Jolly Good Ginger. I heard you might go on his podcast as well, correct?
Well, he said he's starting a new podcast where he's like interviewing like members and stuff. And so I think he said he's kind of booked, but he said he would love to have us on. So I think that would be really cool if we can do that.
And I don't know if you know this, you might. His podcast is called the Under the Influence podcast. So they drink beer while having the podcast.
He mentioned that. He did mention that. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think that would make the podcast more or less enjoyable for you?
I have nothing against beer.
Absolutely.
So, and there's actually some good, local breweries here in my district in the 31st. So,
oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. What kind of beer do they make?
I think they kind of make a little variety. Everybody seems to be into the IPAs right now, which I would admit was not one of my.
You're not an IPA guy?
I'm not an IPA guy.
Neither am I.
But that seems to be kind of like one of the popular ones. But I'm not against having a beer while talking.
If you were to have a particular beer while filming this podcast, which one would it be?
I don't know. Can I say the brand, or like, is it just, or you just want the style?
Not going to be sponsored, by the way. Yeah.
Yeah. I think more or less now it's I started drinking like Stella.
That's my favorite beer.
Is it?
That's my go-to. I buy 12 of them every week, and it's my end of the day ritual.
12 of them every weekend? Is that what you say?
No, I said for the week, and they last me for the week.
Okay.
No, that's not. I have a friend. I'm always talking about my friends on the show, I feel like, who he averages probably 12 a day. Maybe a little less than that now. He's doing a little better. But no, 12 a week is the rate I was talking about. But it's always Stella.
Yeah.
In the bottle particular, that's my favorite way to drink them.
Oh yeah, no, I prefer the bottle too. I think it keeps it nice and cool. Yeah. The can, I think sometimes can give you a little kind of a different taste. Things that the glass is more natural, but
yeah, I'm not a fan of the can as much. It's obviously sells a great beer. It's hard to fuck up a Stella.
I prefer it actually if I had a choice, give me a draft.
The tap is great.
Yeah.
Usually that's my take too. I actually still even like the bottle for the Stella, but a cold draft beer is hard to beat.
Yeah. Now that we're just talking about beer here, right? But I would say probably my all too all-time favorite beers,
Mm-hmm.
and these ones are like a little bit heavier, and it's the reason I think why I drink like the Stella now. It's because it's not as heavy. It's pretty light. I
It's light
can
beer. Yeah.
handle a little bit better in my older age. But Alaskan Amber.
Oh,
And
yeah?
when I lived up in the Pacific Northwest, when I was in the Navy up in Washington State, I'm like, what is this beer? And, it had a nice amber color, very good taste. Once in a while, you can find it out in California.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't seen it anywhere around here, but it's just nice and smooth, but it is a little bit more heavier now, for me. Back when I was your age, it was no problem.
It's a stout, or is it ale?
It's an ale.
It's an
yeah,
amber.
it's an amber
It's an
ale,
amber, you said
right?
that.
So it's got like the brown color,
Okay.
amber color. And then when I was in the Navy, and I was spent a good amount of time in Europe in the Mediterranean, frequented a lot of Irish pubs. So I got really into this beer called Kilkenny.
Okay. I've not heard of that one.
Yeah, so that is
Sounds like an Irish beer.
It's an Irish ale, made I think in the city of Kilkenny, and I don't know what county it is there in Ireland, but that is almost like I don't know, the way I kind of think of it, it's like a sister beer to Guinness, because it has if you pour it right, you should pour it just like a Guinness.
Mm-hmm.
And then it has like the head right on it there, nice, and it's creamy, but it's a creamy Irish ale, and it just has like a different kind of taste than, not exactly like a Guinness, but kind of like a Guinness, but it has kind of like a different kind of taste that I prefer to the Guinness, and it was just a nice. And then Caffrey's was another one that was just kind of like same style of beer, but the Kilkenny, I think I liked better than the Caffrey's.
This is an eclectic taste. Side note here, I think one of the future episodes, I think we should both come in with 3 beers and try them on the shoot. Well, both depending on what time we shoot it. I don't know how you feel about drinking at our 10 a.m. shoots. But
yeah, I don't know. We may have to have a later episode one night where I don't have to go into the Capitol to vote after having a couple beers.
But that's awesome. I also, just to get back to earlier with the Jolly Good Ginger, I know he's a veteran. I heard you guys had the chance to connect about that.
Yeah, I asked him what branch he was in. He was in the Army. I told him I was in the Navy, and I told him I was the oddball in my family because everybody in my family was in the Army except for me. I decided to join the Navy. Like my dad, my uncles, my grandfathers, all were in the Army, and he says I'm the exact opposite. All my family was in the Navy, but I decided to join the Army.
Oh, so you guys are like the missing puzzle pieces.
Yeah,
for each
so we
other.
had a good little laugh about that. But
yeah, I mean, I have a lot of respect for him and his voice right now, especially with the way the new administration is treating veterans and the way VA benefits are getting slashed. I mean, and we've even talked about it on this show. One of the groups that has benefited from DEI initiatives are veterans. And I think the Republican rhetoric I've heard on that is that veterans are fine on their own, and we respect them, and they're such important people for being able to serve our country that they don't need DEI. I forget who said that in the Trump administration, but it was someone. And I guess my point is that, well, that means you're just ignoring that veterans are people who have served our country, and regardless of who they are, what they've done, they deserve our help. And I think that, and I was just going to say that I think this relationship that maybe you were able to build with the Jolly Good Ginger could be a good chance to speak out against that. And I think you guys should hold a rally at the VA.
Well, he mentioned another friend that he has that I think is also an influencer back in Southern California, who's a veteran who kind of spends a lot of time on veterans issues. And, hopefully he'll be able to connect us there. But look, I think we have veterans preference. Like when veterans are applying for federal jobs, they get a few extra points, on their interview scale, or however the score, however they score them, that they have preference. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that, right? I think, these people served in uniform. Why shouldn't they be able to kind of, maybe kind of move up a little bit because they made that sacrifice. 30% of our federal employees are veterans. And it was, I think, pretty much atrocious what the Trump administration was doing with DOGE, where they were just going in and cutting a lot of these veterans that were there, just, trying to make a living, right? Serving their country. They did it in uniform. Now they're doing it in another way. But, there seems to be this, and I will always argue against this, right? It's this, people have this mentality that somehow if you have a federal job, you're just loafing around, you didn't really earn it, it's something that you have for life, and you don't really have to work after you get there. And nothing could be further from the truth, man. These people work their ass off. And a lot of them, we were never at 100% of the people that we needed, that we were allotted to hire. We were never there. So, they're always filling in gaps and filling in holes and doing more than what they should be doing, because there was never enough people there. Right?
You're referring to when you were at the DOD.
I'm sure at the DOD, yes. Mm-hmm. But even then, even when I was in the military, right, we worked with civilians there who kind of, it's the same thing, right? There was always openings, and there's always, you're trying to find people. It's just like anywhere. You're never ever really going to be at 100%, right? So you're always trying to hire people in, but then people are retiring or people decide to go somewhere else. But, there's always somebody kind of picking up the slack, doing a little bit more to ensure that the job gets done, and they're doing. And especially these members of Congress, which I am one now, right? They write letters all the time. And it's not just asking questions, and they want answers. And some of them, especially during the pandemic, when I was at the Pentagon and we would get these letters, 20 questions, in multiple parts. And we would get one week, and then we get another one the same week, almost the same exact questions, but just kind of asked in a different way. And it was just always kind of but whenever we get one of these letters, people have to stop what they're doing. And now they have to go answer that. And they can't actually do the job they're supposed to be doing, because now they have to spend time answering these letters. Mm-hmm. So it takes away from what they're doing. So that's kind of again, right, where they're going above and beyond and doing the things that need to be done. And that's just the people here in Washington. But, we have people all around the country, all around the world that are, whether it's, taking care of logistics, taking care of the military children, whether it be at the child, the child centers where they watch the kids, or at the schools teaching them. There are a lot of, people out there that are just dedicated to support the military around the world, that do a hell of a job doing it.
Yeah. And I think,
and that's just the Department of Defense that I'm talking about, right? But that goes for every branch that's out there.
And that's all of United States Foreign Service. That's the State Department. That's USAID, right?
USAID, the IRS is overtasked, and they're talking about taking less. They're getting more people out. They're making cuts there, which is just going to make it harder.
If you decrease the funding that the IRS gets, it's going to decrease even more.
Well, they already said, right?
That the IRS
that's what they said. It's going to have an impact on the amount of revenue that the government's going to be able to collect.
Well, why would a billionaire want the IRS to have less money? Why would a billionaire want less audits overall in the economy? It just seems like there's a messy incentive structure there that is bad, and bad for the average American, right? If people who have means can get away with not being audited, then that's just a reckless revenue system for this country. Anyway, that's a side note there, but that's something that much should be.
And I don't think they're getting audited all the time. Donald Trump says he gets audited every year. Maybe he does, but I don't think that's a common practice, for millionaires and billionaires. But, he's not honest either. So maybe they know that they need to audit him every year.
Sure. I think the point is that DOGE takes away funding from branches of our government that do things that are efficient, right? It's called the Department of Government Efficiency. It is more efficient to fund the IRS so that the right people get audited, that the right people are paying the taxes that they need to, so that our government can have more funding to do the things it deserves, like funding military schools in overseas, so that the children of our foreign service members can do their job, right?
And I mean, in the audits, right, and everything, and it's not just the audits, it's the processing of the applications, right, just to make sure that people aren't cheating the government so that we can collect these resources that they owe.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like the IRS is like this bad being out there that's just going above and beyond what it needs to do and harassing people. They're just doing their job.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And maybe this is going to change, but on the subject of veterans, obviously up until now, and largely still, veterans have been one of Trump's main voting blocks. Veterans usually vote Republican, and they've been very supportive of Trump. I think it's been made clear in some media that veterans are surprised and upset with the cuts and ways in which Doge has affected their benefits. That being said, to you, what do you think is the driving cause of why so many veterans and people involved with the military have historically voted Republican, and do you think that's going to change?
I don't know. The way I always thought about it, and I guess I kind of thought about it more this way when I was actually in the military, in a sense, like, job security might have something to do with it, right? Because I remember when I was younger, like when I was in high school and I was getting ready to join, and when I was in, Republicans always kind of talked about a bigger, stronger military.
Mm-hmm.
And when you have a bigger military, you're going to have more people in the military to kind of serve it, right? So it was going to be bigger. And look, the military's gone through cuts too, where they've had shortages and where they've had to cut people and this and there, where they're downsized. And then they have, I remember my year when I actually got commissioned in 1994, they actually offered a bunch of people that they just paid their college for, right? That they just, normally you on an ROTC scholarship, now you owe 4 years of active duty service at a minimum. But they were allowing people to get off and go into the inactive reserves, which is like basically, you just got to show up for a PT test once a year. Mm-hmm. And that was it. And they gave people the option. A lot of people took it.
Mm-hmm.
So, there are cuts at times where things kind of go down. And during, the Afghan war, the Iraq war, they were actually looking to bring people in who had gotten out. I remember I got a letter and my wife was like, no, you're not going back. But, they were trying to get more people in, right? So it kind of goes up and down too, right? Just like anything else. But I think for a lot of them, I think that messaging kind of there, it kind of resonated with them about like, we're going to build a stronger military. But I don't think they own that message anymore. And I think, we just as well on the Democratic side, right? We want a strong, efficient military that's, going to be there to be able to defend the nation. I want to increase the size of the Navy. I think we need to kind of build up our ships. I think we need newer ships. A lot of our ships are hitting that 30-year mark, which is, they go beyond that. Right now, they're going to start going into, it's like you're extending the life of the ship, right? It wasn't intended to be around for that long. So, I don't think they own that message anymore. And I think for a while they did, but I think now it's Democrats are going back. And I think it's why we got a lot of Democratic veterans in Congress.
Mm-hmm. So I've noticed that. I have noticed that Democrats have always been more interested in cutting the Pentagon's budget in favor of things like Social Security and Medicare and education and other, I guess the guns versus butter debate is what it's been referred to.
Mm-hmm.
And the Democrats are on the butter side more in that conversation. But I guess in recent years, I've seen it more as a cultural thing as well. I'm definitely curious your thoughts on this and in regards to gender and cultural norms, but obviously I've never perceived the military as a very socially progressive institution, based on just a lot of people I've met growing up that are on the Christian right. There's a lot of people like that in Orange County who are less favorable to being friendly to trans individuals in that conversation in terms of their rights and right to healthcare.
Mm-hmm.
in terms of, I guess we talk a lot about masculinity in this modern day and a little bit on this podcast so far, in that the military is a representation of traditional masculinity, and the Democratic Party is, at least in terms of what some of the party fights for in terms of culture wars, is not a representation of that. And because some people are in the military because of those cultural issues, maybe that's why the Republican Party is also more reasonable to them. I don't think I'm explaining this exactly correctly, but I guess my question to you is, during your time as a service member, did the cultural identity of being in the military play a role in people's political beliefs, or less so then? And even how did that play a role with like men and women in the military at the same time?
Look, I'll disagree with you a bit here, Max. And I think at the time, right, when you look at the history, especially in the 20th century, I think the military has been kind of progressive, kind of there, and
Sure.
in a sense, kind of led the nation at times to make change.
How so?
Well, I think you go back to 1948, President Truman made the decision to integrate the armed forces when a lot of the country was still segregated. And he said, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to start integrating it. We're not going to have, black troops over here and white troops over there. And so that decision was made to integrate, which a lot of people did not agree with, right? They kind of thought that was wrong. And I even think General Eisenhower was one of them who disagreed with that decision when it was made. You can go back to, even here, like I think more recently, President Obama deciding that, hey, we're going to get rid of, Bill Clinton tried to do it, right? I don't think the country was ready at the right time, but that's why he came up with Don't Ask, Don't Tell, which was I think everybody would agree was not like a good policy. It kind of hurt, and people had to kind of hide in the shadows there. And then if it got exposed, they got punished. But, President Obama actually allowed, LGBT, people to serve in the military when he made that decision that we're going to open it up and nobody has to kind of hide who they are anymore. They can do that. So, and I think that was at times really, it kind of had a big push in the movement, right? To kind of to let people know that, hey, maybe we don't have to hide anymore. Maybe we can be who we are. And there's a lot of people, and I've had them worked with them, when I was at the Pentagon serving there, that are serve openly and are able to do that and be themselves. And I think it's actually helped them make, and I know it's actually helped them make themselves, better leaders and better, members of the military, for the simple fact that they don't have to hide who they are. And look, I remember when I was in during Don't Ask, Don't Tell, and we had an individual who got taken off my ship because he got exposed by somebody. And it was just like not a good experience to kind of like see that, right? This all of a sudden this person was there and then they were gone. You're like, oh, what happened? He's like, oh, well, here's a story, right? This is kind of what we heard. But everybody was kind of hush about it, right? And it was just that. And it wasn't like this. I didn't really know that person that well because I got there, but other people said he was a good individual. He was a good person, a good officer. And, it was gone one day because, they found out that, he was gay. And it was just not I don't know, that actually had a lot of influence on me, right? That I think as to like, during my time in that if I ever found out or if I knew, and I did, that I was never ever going to do that to anybody. I'm just going to let them live their lives. If you want to say I'm helping to keep their secret, I'm not going to ask. I don't care. And I will help keep their secret because I didn't like what I saw when that happened.
Right. And I think it's reasonable to say that the military, I think with the history of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, and then Obama getting rid of it, and then even you had during the Trump administration, I think they banned transgender individuals from the military.
Well, he did that, during the first time, right? He tried to note it back, but he never actually kicked him out. Really what happened was I think they stopped people, allowing, transgender people from joining the military.
Right.
Which was, but the irony is there was, a lot of this stuff. So I was the Undersecretary of Defense for Personnel Readiness. I became the first chief diversity and inclusion officer that the Pentagon ever had, right? That was a role that was created, that was signed into law by Donald Trump. It was put there during his first administration, where they actually made a lot of moves and initiatives to go really support.
Why would Trump want that? Why would Trump want a DEI chair in the military?
Well, because it's the right thing to do. Now, why he's gone and reversed it, that I don't know. But
what was the intention of that original position?
Look, diversity is good. Diversity does make us better. And I don't care what Pete Hicks says with, where he says, like,
Sure.
you know, diversity is our strength, is like the worst slogan that I've ever heard. You know, you want people, and it's for different reasons, right? But you want, you know, people to be able to look at their leaders and see someone like them. You know, you want a diverse collection of people to input into the decision making to give you different perspectives. Mm-hmm. That's been the whole big problem with the Russians, right? Is they have one point of view on one thing and the way they look at it, and it hasn't helped them at all. You know, we want to bring in multiple points of view. We want to remove multiple perspectives, and sometimes that comes from the backgrounds and everything, how you grow up. The Navajo code talkers during World War II, right? That was a cultural resource that we had here in the United States that we used to our advantage, and took advantage of that to use this language that they had no idea what the hell they were talking about. That allows us to kind of use, you know, to get messages across, secret messages, that was very productive and allowed us to do things. You know, those are strengths, and these are the things that we need to do and to use, right? And to look at. It's, you know, you got a platoon, and you're like, I mean, it's a hypothetical, right? Or maybe not so, but you got a platoon, and you got people there who could speak Spanish in the platoon, and they're able to kind of talk in Spanish where, you know, maybe the Russians know English, or maybe whoever they're fighting maybe know English, but they don't know Spanish, and you can communicate that way to get something out. You know, that's a plus. And so, you know, these are the different things, right? So it is an advantage, and this is there. And you know, maybe that was something Secretary Esper saw, that we needed this, and we need to push diversity. We need our leaders to look like our enlisted folks as well. And we should increase this, because you do find those diamonds of the rough. And I had the, you know, extreme pleasure of working with a lot of those, right? People that were, you know, I've ran into like several people that were, you know, thrived in the enlisted ranks. They were people of color and thrived in the enlisted ranks. And they, you know, somebody plucked them out and said, like, hey, we think you can do more, so we're going to make you an officer. And they've risen up the officer ranks to be senior officers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess you make a lot of good points in regards to the military. It is an organization that brings people together from truly everywhere in the country. Americans that are growing up Hispanic in California, or Dominican in the Bronx, or white in the South, or wherever, have an incentive to serve their country, and should want to, if that's how they choose to be, right? I guess maybe some of the stories that I saw growing up, it made me see the military as more culturally conservative.
I'm not saying it's not.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, we were talking about DEI and stuff like that, and why it's important, and how, you know, I think at times the military has kind of led the way to make change in the country. But, you know, there's always going to be, I mean, people didn't want to integrate the military. People didn't want to let, you know, gays and lesbians serve openly. People didn't want transgender military people in the military. Every time we kind of make this change, and you see people like Pete Hegseth now is saying that, oh, because we've made these changes, he doesn't see that for the better, right? Our current Secretary of Defense sees that as us becoming weaker and more woke, and not really focusing on the lethality, which nothing could be different. You know, nothing could be more wrong than that, right? Lethality has always been, and what I mean by lethality is, you know, is the ability to go out there and fight, right? And to defend the nation. We've always focused on that. The military's always focused on that, and that has never, ever taken a back seat. But it doesn't mean it can't lead on some of these cultural issues too as well, in order to make change in the country.
Time for a quick message from our sponsors.
This episode of Who Dem is brought to you by Elect Dems Now. We all know that podcasts are the future. They give us the chance to connect with our elected officials like never before. That's why Elect Dems Now is committed to helping voters engage with the people who represent us. Supporting organizations that bring us closer to our representatives is crucial to advancing and advocating for the change we want to see. Whether it's $5 or $50, every donation to Elect Dems Now helps shape our future and ensures a country we can all be proud of. Your support sends a clear message to candidates and elected officials. Connecting with you means connecting with America. To contribute and make a difference, visit electdemsnow.org today. Your donation helps build a world where we are all connected. Paid for by Elect Dems Now, electdemsnow.org, not authorized by any candidate or candidates committee. And another time I remember a cultural issue was the forefront in regards to military was the Colin Kaepernick situation back in the mid-2000s. Do you remember? The NFL quarterback for the San Francisco 49ers, African-American, he started taking a knee during the national anthem to protest police brutality. And I actually remember a year or two after this happened, I had some Vietnam War veterans who visited my English class, and I had always been hearing, like, from kids that I grew up with who were in conservative households, that this was bad what Kaepernick was doing and you should respect the troops. But then two veterans came into my English class and I was like, oh, well, this is the perfect opportunity to ask them. And I did. And they looked at me and said, it's the most disgraceful thing and he shouldn't be doing it. And those two men before me had talked about situations where they had been in life or death times in Vietnam. And honestly, I disagreed with them, but I had nothing left to do but respect their opinion as men who had served our country.
I mean, look,
but,
go ahead, finish.
But I guess my point is I want to hear your take on this as someone who's a veteran, but also involved in diversity.
I think the beauty of our country, right, is that, people are allowed to have different opinions. I think some people right now are trying to kind of stop that. They don't want, when you speak out with something different. And I think we're kind of seeing that right now the administration going after individuals who are here legally, that kind of speak out on different issues that, they're rounding them up and trying to deport them. That's not what America's about. But look, did I like what Kaepernick did? No. Would I have ever done it? No. Do I respect his right to protest and kind of do it in that way that he did? 100%. That was the part of like why we defend the Constitution, right? It gives him that ability to do that. I would never do that, but that doesn't mean that I, don't respect his ability to think that that's the right thing for him to do.
So tell me why then that you didn't like it, because to me, when I saw it, I knew that this man wasn't trying to disrespect our troops or our country, but he was trying to say a problem with.
Well, he's trying to make a point, right? And I think he was trying to make a point around police brutality. I think there are a lot of things that he could have done other ways that kind of, could have helped to get the message out about that, right? I think when he decided to take the knee and he's like, hey, this is the reason I'm taking the knee. For a lot of people, the focus just came about him taking the knee during the national anthem, and it wasn't the focus of the police brutality. If he had gone out and said like, hey,
that's a good point.
Let's, I'm speaking out against police brutality, or I'm doing this about police brutality. We need to protect our citizens. We need to protect the people. That could have put more focus on what he was trying to do. But again, I don't agree with what he did, but I respect the fact that he has the right to think that was the right thing to do and to make that decision.
Well, that's America at the end of the day, right? That's why we're here. That's why you were in our armed services to fight for people's ability to continue doing that. And
also want to throw in a little fact here. Colin Kaepernick, and I think this does get to your point. Colin Kaepernick was advised to take a knee by a veteran. And so that's kind of the overarching idea here, right? That like you go and you serve your country for the First Amendment, for
Yeah.
these rights that these people
Right,
have.
so that people can have the right to free speech.
And veterans
express
can even
themselves.
disagree on whether Kaepernick was right or wrong, but
Right.
at the end of the day, what they can agree on, or what they should agree on, is that he has that right in
Right.
his First Amendment.
Yeah, exactly. And that's, to me, that's what it comes down to, right? Do I agree with what he did? No. But do I respect the fact that he has the right to do that? 100%.
Yeah. And I will say, Colin Kaepernick was a black athlete.
Mhm.
And I think when you're in that position, it's a different perspective than another kind of public figure or another kind of person who maybe they're a community organizer or a religious figure or even a politician. When you say something, you don't necessarily know that it's going to be heard. And I think from his position, all right, as a black athlete, I'm going to take a knee. It's what I can do. It's the ability, what I have. And he did that.
Well, I think, to kind of go to your point there, right? He was a black athlete, not only just a black athlete, but a black quarterback in the NFL, starting quarterback,
Right.
which he kind of saw gave him probably a little bit more of a platform to kind of go where people were going to take notice, right?
Mhm.
If you said, if he had just been a community organizer at some event, nobody might have never even heard about it, right? But the fact that he knew that he was going to be out there, national television, the fact that he was black and the position that he played kind of put him at the forefront of this that was going on and everything. So, he might have known the chance he was taking to kind of, that he was kind of putting his career at risk.
I'm sure.
So, there's, people that kind of go out and do that. I love Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. I think Kareem is and I go back and forth with people all the time, but I think Kareem is the greatest basketball player that ever lived.
Oh, not LeBron?
No, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. I think when you look at the numbers and everything that he's done and he's accomplished, six MVPs, or what does he have? He's got 6 championships, I think 5 MVPs. He won 3 NCAA titles. He was like a 20-time All-Star. He was the all-time leading scorer until LeBron just passed him here. But, it's funny you said LeBron, because most people, like a little bit, like
Not anymore.
older than you, kind
Yeah.
of say
They would say MJ.
yeah, Jordan. But the thing I love about Kareem is that as great as he was as a basketball player, he has not let his basketball define his life. And he's actually a very prominent speaker. He's writes articles all the time. He has a website that I get that kind of talks about where he's, he'll talk about basketball, everyone, but he's talking about current events. He's talking about the issues. He's talking about what's going on. And that is what I love about him. And that is kind of like the ideal, I'm like, guy, why can't more athletes be like this? Right? That, the fact that hey, okay. And that's one of the things I loved about Jackie Robinson too, right? Is Jackie Robinson kind of was thrusted into this role and he knew the importance of what he was doing. He put an entire race, and even more so, I think all people of color, on his back to kind of carry him through, because he knew if he failed, there might not be another, black player in Major League Baseball for another 10 years that had a chance again. And so, but he did that and carried, right? But he didn't stop there, right? After he retired, he still continued to be a voice for the people, to speak out against racism. It didn't live and die with baseball. And it's the same thing with Kareem, is that he has not let basketball define him, and he's continued to speak out on issues, and he calls Trump out all the time. And he has a website that you can kind of check, and an email that he puts out that you can do. And you guys should kind of follow. I think you got to pay for it though, but you should follow him. But I love more the fact, as great as a player he was, I think he's even greater because of what he is doing now and what he has done after his basketball life has made him a great person.
I think this is also interesting too, because this conversation.
And I will say, I should to kind of, but because of all that, right? Because there are a lot of athletes that probably could make an impact and do more with their voice, and they choose not to.
And you think more athletes have a duty to speak out?
Look, I mean, I think I'm not saying everybody has to do it, but I think, when you're at a certain level and stuff like that, people kind of look to you sometimes like, hey, how do you feel about this issue?
Mhm.
I mean, that's one of the things Michael Jordan gets criticized for, right? Is that he was never going to do anything or speak out against anything that was really going to hurt his business or hurt his image,
Mhm.
right? So he hasn't really kind of taken those issues, or maybe he's just not interested, right? And you know what? And that's fine too, because not everybody kind of needs to be that person. But I think for the fact that, like, whether it's like I said, Kaepernick, sorry, because he chose to do that, but even like Kareem, because he has kind of chosen to kind of, like, again, not let his life be defined by basketball.
Mhm.
I think, makes me respect him so much more.
Kareem, I mean, I actually don't know a lot about Kareem Abdul-Jabbar's activism, so I'm definitely going to learn more about it. But it sounds like he was more of an activist after his basketball career.
Not
right?
necessarily either, right? I think, there is when Muhammad Ali was refused to go into the army because, well, for a couple reasons, right? One was I think he was, like, they said he was 4F, probably because of the boxing and stuff, but also because he said he was a Muslim preacher or Muslim minister, I should say. And they, the army basically said, no, you need to come in anyway. And he refused to go, right? They stripped his title away. They took away his livelihood to kind of earn his living through his sport because he couldn't get any fights anymore. And, but, Kareem was one of the ones when he was still in college, like, with Bill Russell, Jim Brown, a lot of people, right, that kind of stood up, in support of Muhammad Ali and what was happening to them. So I think he's always kind of been an activist, kind of, even throughout his career, right? And, and he's been, he's also like an author, right? And he's not writing books on basketball. He's writing books on history and politics and stuff. Like he wrote, he wrote a book about a tank battalion, an all-black tank battalion that served in Europe during World War II. So it's, he's not just kind of, talking about basketball things, right? This is there. And this is, again, why I think he's such a great person and individual, right? Is because he's just done more than what you would expect an athlete to kind of like do, right? He's kind of gone above and beyond. And again, not let basketball define him of who he is. And he's tried to kind of be more than that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. And I think this goes kind of to the question, when you're someone like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, you have public influence. And if you are not okay with the status quo of society, whether that's racially or economically or socially, I kind of do think you have a duty to speak out and go against it. And you're right. I think there's been a number of athletes over time who have done a great job. Obviously, Jackie Robinson put his body and his mind and his family's life on the line. Death threats, like you said. But and then you get to people like Jordan, less so LeBron, who haven't done that as much, have focused on their business interests. And I think it's...
Yeah, I think LeBron kind of later in his career has kind of come out and kind of taken some stance on some issues, but, he really hasn't. And again, right, it could be... I mean, he's not Kareem either, right? I think
basketball wise or
well, no, I think I think LeBron's kind of done some things and kind of been out there and supporting issues and stuff.
School was a
and
big thing,
he's done a lot like to help kids, but I don't expect LeBron to go out and write like history books, right, about like things that were going on and stuff like that. It's just they're two different kind of individuals, I think, when it comes to that point of view.
I think,
right?
well, what Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and I'm going to need you to get something up in a second, Damien, but Kareem Abdul-Jabbar is obviously an extremely intelligent and talented individual.
Right.
There's an interview of LeBron James. They're asking about a book he had from MLK. I want you to see it because it's a hilarious clip. I know Damien's seen it. I can see him getting ready here. But he's obviously never seen the book. He never read the book before, and he's just answering questions about it. I think it's I think maybe this is a clip that says as to why LeBron James has a lot of potential as a philanthropist and obviously the greatest NBA player of all time. But watch this.
So you're holding the autobiography of Malcolm X along with Alex Haley. I don't know how far you are into the book, but what's your biggest takeaway so far?
I kind of just started a couple days ago. Read and a lot of notes over the years. This is my first time actually reading this from start to finish. Very smart man. Very smart man. Basically, his words in the 60s and what was going on is actually what's going on today still. It's unbelievable to kind of read something that's coming directly from him. Wish I had an opportunity to meet him. It's a pretty interesting book so far.
So, yeah, he's not. I don't expect LeBron James to be authoring, socially dynamic, changing books.
I have to throw in this follow-up clip. He actually did. He ends up talking about this.
You have the book right here.
Yeah, we do have it up here, actually. He ends up talking about this on the Pat McAfee show. He responds to these allegations that he hasn't read the book. I love actually Representative Cisneros to see this.
You don't read those fucking books before the games, right? All those books. You
you talk
open
about
it,
that, you're right.
to the first page,
Yeah.
and then you don't read those fucking books ever again. Great role model.
I actually have finished those books. Oh, hold on.
Like if you were to hold this,
Hold on.
people say you would say you read it.
This is how.
That's the art of winning.
Someone take a photo.
All right, take the photo, please. Pat, take the photo.
Yeah, we got it. Hold on.
You got it?
I'll take it from this angle.
You probably read Rich's book.
We got it.
Yeah, first page.
Wow, holy shit, Braun read it.
And then that's it.
That's it. I didn't even talk to you guys this whole time I was up here. All I did was read the whole book.
I don't think you read the book then.
He probably saw the movie. But, that was actually their Charles Barkley has a story that he tells, right, in his first All-Star game.
Mm-hmm.
And, they're all like, I don't know how they do it, but the way they kind of make it sound was like they're all kind of like, in locker rooms kind of together, kind of both sides, both teams. And they're like there, and Charles Barkley tells a story about how, like, he's never really had the chance to meet Kareem yet. And so they're like, oh, yeah, he's over there. Go say hi. Now, Kareem was like always kind of like a very private person, and he would, and I actually remember seeing a clip of this, like during the World Championship, right? And they're like showing the Lakers kind of getting ready. Some guys are listening to music, other guys are kind of getting a little more pumped up, and Kareem's just there reading his book.
Mm-hmm.
And so Charles Barkley's story is like he goes over there, and you could probably find that clip where he talks about it too if you want to look it up. But Charles Barkley goes to Kareem and just kind of goes to introduce himself, and he said Kareem just kind of looks up and, I'm reading.
Damn. Yeah, I would have never approached someone ever again after that. I mean, oh, you got it? Yeah. All right, let's see it.
Actually, this is. Let me,
Oh, yeah.
This is
Yeah.
actually Kareem confirming the story.
Yeah.
To be true.
You to confirm a story for me.
Sure.
Charles at the All-Star game, he says,
At the All-Star game, all the guys get together in the room beforehand, just before they announced it to the crowd. So Kareem is sitting in the corner.
he says you were in the locker room reading a paper.
I'm with like Bird, McHale, and Karl Malone, and I said, I never met Kareem before. They're like, go over and say hello to him. And he's sitting over in the corner by himself with his head down.
It's his first time seeing you, and he said, Mr. Abdul-Jabbar.
Mr. Jabbar, can I talk to you? He looks up, I'm reading.
I told him I was reading.
Yes.
I turn around, these fools laughing at me. They set me, they're on the floor dying laughing.
So that's a true story?
There was times I just couldn't be bothered, man.
Right. I trust me.
Now Charles is making me pay for that.
Yeah.
But he was, he's a very like serious person, like who read all the time, and like you said, right, he's an intellectual who always, I tell my kids, right, learning never ends. It's a lifetime journey.
Mm-hmm.
So Kareem, I think, is one of those persons who's kind of followed that, right, is always kind of teaching, always educating, always kind of, learning, trying to learn more.
Have you ever met Kareem Abdul-Jabbar?
I have not, but I did sit next. I did, and this is I don't really kind of believe in like bothering people like there, but we were I got pretty good seats at a Dodger game, and I will say Kareem was about 3 seats down from me. And it was me and my dad at the game, and then Kareem, I think, was there with one of his sons, and I'm like, oh man, should I like say something? Should I say something? But I'm like, nah. I go, he's very private. I don't want to like kind of go over there and bother him because he's just trying to watch a game like I am, right? You know, enjoy the game with his son like I'm trying to enjoy it with my dad. And I did not say anything to him, but and I say, do I regret it? No, I don't regret it but I mean, would have been nice to have like, you know, had a few words with him and kind of say like, you tell him about how much I admire him and kind of share what I shared with you today about how I feel about him. But you know, that would have been great, but I don't necessarily say I regret it or anything that he didn't do it. But he was literally like 3 seats down from me.
You thought you were being respectful to him based on what you knew about him by not approaching him.
Yeah, 100%. Okay. Yeah.
Fair enough. My roommate actually one time, he worked at the Equinox here in DC, and he was getting texts that Kyrie Irving was in the gym. Oh, yeah. And so he leaves class and he goes and starts like working out in the gym where Kyrie is, like trying to figure out a plan to meet him. Mm-hmm. And then he's working out and he sees another guy go up to Kyrie Irving and try and like ask for a picture. And Kyrie's like, no. He's like locked in his headphones, hoodie on, like trying to work out. And then my roommate, his name's Tushar. Tushar walks up and daps up Kyrie on his way out. He's just like, can I dap you up? And then Kyrie's like, yeah, dog. And he daps him up. And then Tushar immediately leaves and he's like, comes back to the room.
What's a dap you up? I don't know what's
like
that.
This here. It's like a handshake.
Oh,
it's
okay.
Like a handshake. You want me
is that what you were trying to do?
Like this.
All right.
It's like this. You go like, no, you go.
Oh, like that. Like that. Okay.
That's a dap.
I never heard it called that before. Huh?
Yeah. So there you go. Now you know. Yeah. But he comes back to like our room after he's got his like hand holding up. He's like, guys, I just dapped up Kyrie. And he like didn't wash the hand for like, I don't know a while after that. But yeah, no. Sometimes famous people don't want to be bothered. More of the story.
Yeah, especially when they're working out, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you ever had that moment where people are approaching you? You felt like, oh, I'm there now, at least as like a member of Congress or a public figure, not necessarily like where you're unbothered, but like where you're like, I guess I'm a little bit of a celebrity now. Does that happen?
No, God, no. I've never ever felt that I was a celebrity or anything like that. Right now, look, when I do go to events, I think people do kind of come up to me and like say hi, and they want to ask me about an issue, or they, you know, sometimes it's to tell me like I'm not doing a great job, and other times it's that how much they support me. So. But, you know, I think that just kind of comes with the job, and you got to expect it. And it's I would never, ever turn anybody away and tell them, like, hey, don't bother me now. Mm-hmm. But, yeah, I think for me, that's just part of the job. But most of the time, I think I can kind of, you know, I can go into a restaurant. Nobody really knows who I am either, right? So it's a totally different situation.
Not all your colleagues can do that, though, especially in this town.
No, I agree with that, yeah.
Probably even you, the way people keep track of things in DC. I mean, I'm sure you walk into a restaurant, you're like, oh, that's Congressman Cisneros over there. You got the lobbyist, like, should we go ask him for an introduction or something? Maybe not.
Well, those people know who, I mean, yeah, they kind of tend to know who people are, right?
Yeah.
And I think even some of the staffers and everything too, like, I will say there was one time I was on the metro, right in the metro, and somebody came up to me and said, Congressman Cisneros, wow, you actually ride the metro? I'm like, yeah, every once in a while. Like, wow, that's so great. Yeah. So, but, you know, it does happen from time to time, but it's not like, you know, too. But as soon as I can, I take the suit off too, right? And I'm putting on a pair of jeans or a pair of shorts and kind of just going a little bit more casual and relaxed.
I would be willing to bet that you want to keep it that way, in the sense that you can fly under the radar. You don't want to have people bothering you.
I think it, in that aspect, yeah, it does kind of help, right? It's, you know, so if I can kind of dress down a little bit or kind of go a little bit more casual, and then people don't really kind of tend to think like, oh, hey, that's the congressman.
I have kind of a question. I was actually talking about this in my class earlier today, kind of on this topic, because whether you're a member of Congress or maybe even you're a staffer in Washington, D.C., but let's talk about being a member of Congress or an elected official in general. I'm curious over the question of whether it's a noble job or not. Because on the one hand, the purpose of being a member of Congress and elected official is to serve the people you're elected. You come here because you believe in something in a way to make the world better, and you want to make sure other people have access to that vision.
Mm-hmm.
On the other hand, you also have to have the type of personality to be willing to go out in public and talk about these ideas, and like the willingness to convince people that you are the one to do that, and then to come here and get the recognition to do those things, right? That I don't know how to say it, but even if you run for Congress for the most genuine reasons, and I don't even think everyone does, but let's say it's that situation, I think it takes a little bit of ego too. I don't know how you've encountered this in your own job, but I guess I am curious how you would respond to the question, is being a member of Congress a noble job?
I think it is.
Mm-hmm.
I think the opinion that people have had of Congress has definitely been going down the hill, during time. I think, there was, I was at the Reagan Defense Forum a couple years ago, right? And they were talking about this, the people's view of the military is just like it's continues to go down. But, it was going down for every government agency, right? And, they would do like Department of Defense, like State Department, IRS or whoever, right? And then Congress down there, right? Congress is always at the lowest, how people thought of it.
Yeah.
But, everything was always kind of going down. And I think even for Congress, right, it continues to like go down. The people just don't really think of it that highly anymore or whatever, right? But I think noble in the sense to like serve and to kind of want to do like the common good. I mean, this is not like I don't know. I think there has to be a willingness to kind of serve in order to do that, right? And I think if you don't want to serve, you're in it for the wrong reason. And I don't think, now you can agree or disagree on issues or not. And you may not, you can say like, oh, well, they don't really want to serve, right? Or this person's nuts over here, or they're crazy over there. And, why are they in Congress? But I mean, even if we have totally different viewpoints at the, and on opposite ends of the political spectrum, I don't think they would have done this just if it was just a thing to kind of go in there and they didn't want to serve. And look, I could be totally wrong about that because I think that was my point of view. I mean, I did this because I thought I could do more and I thought I could help more. And I think I have an interesting perspective on things. I've seen, I've had, when you look at it, I've had kind of like a crazy life, right? People kind of think now it's like, okay, you're wealthy, but I didn't start out that way. My family struggled just like everybody else's. My family didn't have, health insurance for a while. My dad used to go down and grab his medications from Tijuana because they were cheaper down there. I worked at a factory, like working the night shift, from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. But I also stood the midwatch there in the Persian Gulf, right, at times too, right? So I've had these different perspectives of different things kind of like going on in my life where I think I can bring it all in together and kind of gives me a perspective on, on issues and things like that a lot of people don't have. I remember coming into, we got flown out to this financial firm. They flew us out to their headquarters to go see this, right? And we're meeting like CEOs and all these like vice presidents of the company.
This is as a member of Congress.
No, this was like way before, right? This is kind of like as we kind of hit it big, right? And where it became wealthy. And this is like a company that I'd been with, like, I've invested like little bits here and there forever, right? And one of the guys like, hey, what's the the biggest change from your life now to how it used to be before? I'm like, well, when all I had was my mutual fund with you guys never flew me out to meet with all the VPs and and the CEO. So I get it though, right? I've seen those different aspects, right? I see how, people get treated differently, because of their wealth and because of what they have. But I've been on the other end too, right? Where you've kind of been shit on because people don't think you have anything, and they don't think you have anything to contribute because you don't. Mm-hmm. So it gives me, I've lived this life on a wide spectrum of things that I think gives me a lot of values and things right there to kind of go into input, right? And I think that's why I thought I wanted to serve. And I did think this is a noble profession to kind of go and to do that. Now, have people taken advantage of it at times? Hell yeah. If people kind of got into it for the wrong reasons, hell yeah. But, I for the most part, I want to believe that if people are doing it for the right thing, even if we don't agree on the issues at all, I think they think what they're doing is right. I think what I'm doing is right. And hopefully we can find somewhere in the middle where we can agree on and kind of do the noble thing for the American people.
So you're saying, from you personally, you've been in a situation where you've had nothing, you've been less fortunate, and you've been wealthy extraordinarily. And after seeing both of those worlds, to you, there's nothing left to do but to serve your community, and you saw being a member of Congress is the best way to do that.
Well, I felt like I could do more, right? And I kind of felt like one way about doing that was kind of going out there and running for Congress, because maybe I think a lot of people too, they don't see what they like. If they're not seeing something that they like, so they say like, hey, I'm going to go do that. And that's kind of what I did. I'd never run for office before, and I did anything before I ran for office the first time before I ran for Congress. This is the only political office I think I've ever held, other than kind of being an appointee in the administration. But I never ran for city council or anything, or school board or anything like that, right? This was it, right? And I thought this because I thought my perspective on life could bring something unique here to kind of help make change and make it for the better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you've got a pretty broad perspective on life.
Mm-hmm.
How about this? I am 22 years old. I graduate college in, 2-3 weeks now?
Oh, really?
So
wow. That close?
Yeah.
Wow.
It's coming up. So I guess the way I see it is my practice run on life is starting to come to an end, and it's more or less the real thing now. At least that's my mindset. Maybe that's the wrong mindset, but I do want to ask you, talking about all you've experienced, what's your advice to a 22-year-old who's about to graduate college?
Well, let me ask you, like, what are you thinking of doing? I mean, we're doing this, right? We got the podcast, but beyond that, what else is there?
Yeah. So I got into politics when I was 15. I went to, obviously growing up in Orange County, it was a pretty red area, and we also lived in a pretty competitive congressional district. And I was like, well, I care about this. I talk about it with people a lot. Let me actually do something. So I started when I was 15, volunteering for Mike Levin's first congressional campaign. And then I was that kid in high school. I would run our school's debate club. It was really more of just a forum for people to discuss things and less trying to win debates. And I also started getting involved in media too. I wrote for my high school's newspaper, but then when I came to college, I met a guy named Fareed who was starting a company called Left, Middle, Right. Their goal was to present stories with the left, middle, and the right perspective. And it was a great idea, but they weren't getting a lot of traction with their content. And he wanted me to make videos to promote their brand and help them grow. So I did. I started just making videos, talking to people on different college campuses and everywhere about different issues. And it was a success. Over a few years while I did it, I think we got 90 million views across the videos of me talking to people. And it led to different opportunities with I even worked with a congressional committee one semester to help them with content and other different organizations. And it was a great way for me to experience college, I think, in terms of a project where I could grow and figure out what I wanted to do. And I think, right now I'm dealing with a couple different employment situations. But I think long term, I know a couple things I like making things. I made videos, and I've worked on some other content creation projects too. I think finding new and better ways to do media, both from a politics standpoint, but also entertainment, is fun for me. But obviously I got into all of this because I care about the issues. And I want to be able to do it in a way that is something that's enjoyable for me and that I'm good at. So that's what I know about myself. I don't really have a ton of idea long-term about where I'm going to be. I just know that usually when I'm faced with a decision, I do what I want. And so far it's worked out for me. Yeah. But again, I'm 22 years old. It's hard to know for sure.
Advice I would give you is just make sure you enjoy what you're doing. Yeah. Because I've been there too, where you have, where you're doing something and you're kind of like, okay, I'm just really kind of paying the bills here, right? But you're not really enjoying it. I enjoy serving, right? So that's the thing. I enjoyed serving in the military. I enjoy serving in Congress. I love kind of making an impact in the community. And I think that's where I've kind of gotten the most enjoyment. And I think it's helped me get the best results of myself, right? In order to do that, right? And the ability to serve. I think, so definitely find something that you enjoy and that you love doing, and that'll make it won't really kind of seem like work, and it'll kind of be better for you that way. But, I think just try and get as much experience as you can too, right? Mm-hmm. I think, every once in a while I run into an individual who just wants to go right into politics. They want to go run for office, right? I'm going to go back and I'm going to run for the school board. I'm going to run for the city council.
About 25-year-olds running for office?
Yeah.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah. And I'm like, you never even held a job. It's like, so why would anyone vote for you, right? What experience are you bringing to the table? How can you relate to the people? So that's why I say, like, get as much experience as you can, diversify yourself, sure. Try and have these different experiences and things like that. When you get time off, travel. I wish more people would travel and see the world.
Well, you got to see the world in a pretty unique way through the military, which is awesome.
No, it's great. If you want, we can go down to their cruise office and we can talk about like joining the Navy if you want to do that, if you're interested. I think, I wish more people would and kind of think of it. Mm-hmm. It is an honorable profession. It's not something you need to do. A lot of people choose to do it for like 30 plus years. Mm-hmm. I had a good friend who retired, like last year. I had another friend that just retired, a few weeks ago. But it is, it's an honorable profession, right? If you can stay on for that long. But I think it is something that a good experience as well to have, that you can kind of build a lot of leadership skills. And, a lot of people end up learning a trade and life skills that they'll have for the rest of their lives and joining the military as well.
Yeah. And that's you talk about it in a way that sounds like what you did gave you a lot of growth. Yeah. And just raw experience.
Yeah, I know. So and this is one of the things that, when I was at the Pentagon, right, and we would talk, and I would talk to veterans groups, and I would tell them, we need your help. And this is part of not controlling the message, right, mm-hmm. is I think whenever I would talk to young people, I remember talking to one young man who was like a family friend, and he's like, oh, no, I don't want to get PTSD. I don't want to die.
Oh, about joining the military.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'm not saying people don't get that, right? Or that they don't, or there's not like a possibility of a threat, right? But it's of an injury happening, or you could lose your life. There is a chance you take on that, right? But there is a lot of growth and things and skills that you can learn there as well. I think a lot of times people just want to focus on the absolute worst that can happen to you. And not really kind of look at the benefits that, time in the military can provide to an individual. I mean, it just changed people's lives, for the good, where it's kind of given them opportunity, right? It's taught them a skill. It's taught them leadership, and they've been able to kind of take that and do other things with that and go on and do other things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Well, I think it's been a great conversation about the military today. I think I enjoyed learning about that aspect of your background more because it's important and it tells the story of you and why you're doing what you want to do, especially from the perspective of someone who wants to serve. So appreciate you talking about that today.
Well, thank you very much. Always great talking to you. And I guess I'm assuming since we're not ending the podcast, you're going to stay here in the DC area. So,
we're working on it. But yeah.
All right. Well, congratulations, Max. I'm sure we'll see you next week here too, right? But that's great. I actually didn't know you were coming. That your graduation is close. For some reason, I thought you had another year.
He does, not me.